Hello, family. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The black cars line the narrow driveway of St. Paul's Cathedral, their tinted windows reflecting the gray, overcast sky. Mike Donovan stepped out of the last one, dressed in a sharply tailored suit, his signature blue eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. His mother's death had been quiet and sudden, and despite the presence of distant relatives, business partners, and press hanging at the gates, Mike felt completely alone. He hadn't cried. He hadn't even flinched. The woman who raised him was gone, and yet the part of him that should feel something was buried deep behind boardroom instincts and a lifetime of control. He took a seat in the front pew, unmoved, staring blankly at the closed casket until a small shuffle behind him made him turn. She stood at the back of the church. Mary. Her hair was pinned up in a loose bun, the soft black dress clinging to her figure in that modest, graceful way he remembered. But that wasn't what made his breath hitch. It was the two small boys standing quietly beside her, clutching each of her hands. Boys who couldn't have been older than 5. Boys with deep, piercing blue eyes that mirrored his own so precisely, it sent a chill through his entire body. One of them turned his head slightly and locked eyes with him, innocent and unknowing. In that moment, time stopped. Mike blinked and looked again, but the resemblance was unmistakable. His grip on the church bench tightened. As the choir began to sing, Mike sat back down slowly, his heart racing beneath his emotionless exterior. That couldn't be possible. Could it? Mike didn't follow them immediately. He sat frozen on the pew, his thoughts tangled in a storm of disbelief. The funeral was ending, the final prayers echoed, but all he could focus on was the last glance that child gave him. It wasn't vague familiarity. It was unsettling, a mirror of his own childhood photographs. When he finally stood, guests were filing out. He turned his head sharply but found no sign of Mary or the boys. Instead, he caught a glimpse of Anna Rivers, Mary's longtime friend, walking briskly toward the exit. "Anna," he called out. She hesitated, turned, and gave him a look that was half irritation, half resignation. "Donovan," she said curtly, "don't make a scene." He approached slowly. "They were with her, weren't they?" he asked, voice low. Anna folded her arms. "You already know the answer to that." Then she turned her back and walked away. That answer, that subtle confirmation, hit harder than he expected. Outside the cathedral, the wind was harsher than before. Mike stood by his car but didn't get in. His driver waited silently. Through the crowd, he finally spotted them. Mary was buckling the boys into the back of a modest old gray sedan. She didn't look toward him, not once. One of the boys, the livelier one, was pointing at pigeons fluttering near the curb, giggling, his curls bouncing with every step. The other stood closer to Mary's side, quiet and observant. Mike's heart thudded like a war drum. The resemblance wasn't coincidence. He knew what he saw. As she opened the driver's side door, she looked up for just a breath of a second, and their eyes met. She didn't smile, she didn't frown. She just stared. Then quietly, she got in and drove away without a word. That silence burned louder than any confrontation could have. Mike clenched his jaw, finally climbing into his car. "Home, sir?" his driver asked. "No," Mike replied, eyes still on the retreating car. "Follow her." The drive took them far beyond the city's polished edges into older neighborhoods Mike hadn't stepped into for years. His tinted window shielded him from curious glances as they tailed Mary's car at a discreet distance. He didn't recognize the street she turned onto, lined with small, weather-worn homes with fading paint and struggling flower beds. Mary parked in front of a narrow cream bungalow with chipped steps and children's drawings taped to the front window. She carried a bag in one hand and guided the boys with the other. Mike's fingers hovered over the car door handle. He wanted to storm in, demand answers, ask how she could hide this from him. But something held him back. Instead, he stepped out calmly, approached the gate, and waited until she noticed. She did about 3 steps from the front porch. Mary's brows lifted slightly in surprise, but she didn't look afraid. She looked tired. "Mike," she said softly, her voice cautious, "this isn't the place." Mike's voice cracked before he could temper it. Are they mine? The words came out like gravel scraping against stone. Mary blinked, her lips parting, but no sound coming for a moment. This isn't how I wanted this to happen, she finally said. But you didn't give me a choice. The boys had already run into the house. Mike took a step closer, his voice sharp. Don't spin this. You disappeared. You never said a word. 5 years, Mary. She held her ground. 5 years ago, you looked me in the eye the morning after and didn't say anything. Not a word. You left, and I assumed you made your choice. Her words hit like a slap. What morning? He asked, eyes narrowing. That night after the company party, she said, voice trembling now. You don't remember? Mike's blood turned cold. No, he whispered. Mary stared at him like he was a stranger, her fingers tightening around her keys. Then we have a bigger problem, don't we? She said softly. Come back when you're ready to ask questions instead of just demanding answers. She turned, walked inside, and closed the door behind her with painful finality. The next morning, Mike sat in his home office, staring at nothing. His scotch sat untouched on the glass desk, condensation dripping onto a forgotten document. He'd barely slept. His mind kept looping the way Mary had looked at him, equal parts accusation and hurt. He didn't remember that night. Not the morning she described, not the conversation, not even how they ended up together after the party. Just fog. Endless, confusing fog. A knock interrupted his days. Samantha entered with a thermos and a box of pastries. Thought you could use some fuel, she said with a small smile. You haven't checked in since the funeral. Mike gave a distracted nod. Thanks. She placed the box on the edge of his desk and tilted her head. You okay? He hesitated. No, he admitted. I think I missed something. Something important years ago. Samantha took a seat, her tone gentle. Is this about Mary? His eyes flicked to her. You knew she was there? She shrugged. I saw her, yes. I didn't want to mention it unless you did. Mike sighed and leaned back. She has kids. Twins. They look just like me. Samantha's brows rose slightly, but her expression didn't shift. That's a lot, he nodded slowly. She says I already knew that something happened after the party 5 years ago, but I don't remember any of it. There was a long silence before Samantha asked, Do you think she's lying? He shook his head. No, that's what scares me. Samantha leaned forward and placed a comforting hand on his. Mike, sometimes our minds bury things, especially around trauma or stress. That party was overwhelming. Maybe it was too much. Mike stared at her hand on his. But what if I hurt her by forgetting? He whispered. What if I made her go through all this alone? Samantha squeezed gently. Then you make it right now. Dwelling won't undo it. Focus on what you can build going forward. Her voice was calming, like always. But somewhere deep in Mike's chest, doubt and guilt warred against logic. And nothing about this felt right. The evening sun filtered through the study blinds in golden streaks as Mike stood before his late mother's antique desk, methodically opening drawer after drawer. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, maybe peace, maybe distraction. But then, tucked beneath a small stack of his childhood drawings, he found it. A cream envelope. His name was written in Mary's elegant handwriting. The ink had slightly faded, as if it had been there for years. Hands slightly trembling, he opened it. The scent of old paper and faint rose perfume met him, and with it, memories of Mary. The letter was long, not angry, not accusatory, just heartbreaking. She had written it after the party, pouring her confusion, fear, and disappointment into every line. I thought we meant something, she had written. But you looked at me like a stranger. I thought I deserved at least a goodbye. Mike read it twice, then again, each time feeling the words twist tighter around his conscience. There had been no stamps, no signs it had been mailed. She must have delivered it by hand. Likely while he was traveling or buried in contracts and meetings, another moment he had blindly missed. Mike collapsed into the worn leather chair by the window, holding the letter like it might shatter. His mother must have kept it. Had she read it? Had she planned to give it to him? Regret moved through his chest like smoke. Samantha walked in quietly, carrying his phone. There's a board update from Tokyo, she said softly, but paused at the sight of him. Mike! He lifted the letter and stared at her. She wrote me this. I never read it. I never even knew it was here. Samantha stepped closer, her voice low and calm. Maybe your mom didn't think the time was right. Mike's voice cracked. Or maybe I just wasn't the man who was supposed to read it back then. He stood up, gripping the paper. I need to know the truth now. I won't sleep until I do. Samantha offered a nod and a soft pat on his shoulder. Whatever you decide, I'm here, she said. But as Mike walked past her, something in her gaze lingered, unreadable and still. Mike returned to the bungalow the next day, the letter carefully folded and tucked into his inside jacket pocket like a fragile artifact. He parked across the street and sat in silence for a while, watching as Daniel rode a small tricycle along the walkway, and Dean arranged pebbles along the edge of the lawn. Mary emerged shortly after, carrying a watering can and humming softly. Mike stepped out of the car and approached slowly. When she saw him, she didn't flinch, just nodded toward the steps. You read it, didn't you? She asked quietly. Mike nodded, the letter now in his hands. Why didn't you send it? He asked. I left it at your mother's. I figured she'd give it to you when the time was right, Mary said, her eyes not leaving the boys. I waited for a call, a text, anything. But silence was my answer. Mike exhaled, the weight of the paper suddenly immense. You wrote like I abandoned you, he said. Mary met his gaze then. Because I thought you did. Her voice cracked, but she held steady. We had something, Mike. Or at least I thought we did. That night, it wasn't casual to me. And you were so different the next morning. Distant, silent, like you wanted me out of your world. Mike stared at her, struggling to piece together her pain with the hole in his memory. I swear to you, I don't remember the morning. Not the conversation, not the goodbye. Mary's brows furrowed. You don't remember the night either, she asked, searching his face. Only the party. After that it's blank, he said, voice hushed. Mary looked shaken for the first time. Mike, we were together. We kissed. You held me. Her words hit like thunder. And you said you'd call. Silence stretched between them, thick and broken. Then something's very wrong, Mike finally said, because I never would have walked away if I knew. Mary paced her living room while Mike sat at the edge of the couch, hands clasped tight between his knees. The boys were asleep in their room, and Anna had taken them out earlier for ice cream to give them space. The ticking wall clock was the only sound until Mary finally spoke. You're telling me, all these years. You didn't know. Her tone was a fragile mix of disbelief and suppressed anger. Mike shook his head slowly. I woke up the next morning in my own bed. Fully dressed, no memory past the toast. Mary's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Do you know how cruel that sounds to someone who was there? Who gave you her heart? He stood not to argue, but to come closer. That's why I'm here. I'm not defending myself. I'm trying to understand how we lived two completely different realities from the same night. Mary hugged her arms across her chest, leaning against the doorframe. I was going to keep him a secret forever, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Until I saw you at the funeral, and Daniel tugged my hand and said, Mommy, he has my eyes. Mike swallowed hard. They do. They look just like my baby pictures. The acknowledgement sent a tremor through her chest. I hated you for years, she confessed. For pretending we never happened. For making me raise them alone, thinking I was just some forgettable mistake. Mike's face was raw, pain unhidden. I don't want to be a mistake, Mary. And I don't want to miss another second of their lives. She looked up at him with exhausted eyes. Then start over, not with promises, but with truth. All of it, Mike nodded solemnly. Then the first truth is this. I need to find out what happened that night. Because something isn't adding up. The words settled in the room like a vow. The Donovan Foundation Gala 5 years ago had been the height of extravagance, an opulent affair held at the Granville Hotel ballroom, filled with champagne flutes, string quartets, and high-profile guests. Mike sat in his study late at night now, combing through photos from that evening pulled up on his tablet. His eyes scanned faces frozen in celebration, trying to force his memory to cooperate. He saw himself in nearly every shot, smiling, raising glasses, even dancing with business executives. But nothing from later that night sparked recognition. One image showed Mary at the edge of the dance floor, her eyes on him with a soft smile. He zoomed in on it, as if her gaze could pull back the curtain over his missing hours. But the next few photos showed nothing unusual. No one suspicious. No signs of what could have gone wrong. The evening, in hindsight, looked perfect. Then why does it feel like it broke something I never knew I had? He murmured aloud to no one. Mike decided to visit the Granville himself. The lobby still smelled of polished mahogany and expensive cologne. The same concierge from years ago now wore a few more wrinkles and recognized Mike immediately. "Back again, Mr. Donovan?" he asked, voice warm. "Just revisiting old ground," Mike replied. "I had a suite here the night of our company gala, room 1821. The concierge typed into the computer. "Yes, you were checked in that night, but it wasn't you who presented the card at check-in." Mike's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" The concierge turned the screen toward him. "This signature belongs to someone else. You didn't swipe your card either. Whoever handled check-in used executive credentials, same access level your assistant would carry, for instance." Mike's stomach dropped. "Do you have the name?" The man shook his head. "It was cleared from the digital logs after a month. Unless there was an incident, we purged the record." As Mike turned to leave, the concierge added, "But I do remember something odd. You looked, out of it, like you weren't yourself." Mike didn't reply. He got into his car, staring at the wheel. If he hadn't checked himself in, who had? And what exactly had they planned for him that night? Mike's hands trembled slightly as he signed the consent form at the private DNA clinic. His sterile room was cold, the air conditioning buzzing faintly above his head. Across from him sat Mary, arms folded, jaw tight. Between them, Daniel and Dean were coloring on the waiting room's activity table, blissfully unaware of the weight in the air. "I hate that it's come to this," Mary said softly, barely looking up. Mike's voice was lower. "I know, but I need facts. Not because I don't believe you, because I don't believe me." There was no bitterness in his tone, only weariness. "I want this to be real. I just need to see it on paper. I need something I can hold on to while I try to understand everything else I've lost." Mary didn't respond, just nodded slowly as the nurse called them in. Buccal swabs were taken from Mike and the twins. It was quick, clinical, painfully impersonal for something so deeply personal. 3 days later, Mike received the results at his office. Samantha handed him the envelope with her usual calm efficiency. "Do you want to be alone?" she asked. Mike hesitated. "No, just wait here." He opened the envelope slowly, like it might explode. The report was clear, 99.9998% probability of paternity. He stared at the words, letting them burn themselves into his brain. Samantha leaned forward. "It's true then?" she asked. Mike nodded once, not lifting his eyes. "They're mine." He looked out the window, past the skyline he once prided himself on conquering, and whispered, "And I didn't even know their first words." Samantha stood and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You have time, Mike. Maybe not to change the past, but to rewrite the future." He didn't answer, but inside, guilt festered like a slow fire. Mary had carried the truth alone for 5 years. The boys had grown up without their father. And he had lived in blind, manufactured peace, never knowing what was taken from him. Now, every second counted. That weekend, Mike visited Mary's home with cautious optimism and a gift tucked to his arm, a handcrafted wooden puzzle of the world map, something he would have loved as a child. The twins welcomed him shyly. Mary gave no smile, but she opened the door wider. "You're trying," she said quietly. "That's something." They played outside under the late afternoon sun. Mike sat on the lawn with the boys, helping Daniel piece together countries while Dean flopped on the grass with a juice box. After a while, Daniel looked up at him and asked, "Why do your eyes look like ours?" The question caught Mike off guard. Mary tensed where she stood on the porch. Mike leaned closer and smiled gently. "Because we're a little alike, you and me." Dean chimed in, "Are you Mommy's friend?" Mike looked up at Mary, then back at the boys. "I used to be, and I hope I can be again. If that's okay." Daniel studied him closely, then nodded once. "Okay." Then added, "Can we call you Mr. Mike?" Mike laughed, a rare sound that surprised even him. "I'd be honored." The moment was small, simple, but for Mike it cracked something open inside him that had long gone dormant. The boys' innocence, their quick acceptance, made his chest ache. Later, as he stood to leave, Mary walked him to the gate. "You handled that well," she said. "They've never asked before." Mike looked at her seriously. They deserve more than Mr. Mike. They deserve a father who remembers why he left. I still don't, but I swear I'm going to find out. Mary's eyes softened. Just don't make promises you can't keep. He nodded. This one I will. As he walked away, both boys peeked through the window, waving. For the first time in years, Mike didn't feel like a ghost. He felt like something was beginning. Mike leaned against the balcony railing of his penthouse apartment, the cold wind biting at his skin as night settled over the city. He was staring into the glittering skyline, but his thoughts remained stuck in the hollow spaces of that missing night. $1 million memory gap haunting him more now than any business failure ever had. He hadn't slept properly in days. The fragments were coming to him in flashes now, blurry images that felt half-imagined. A champagne glass, laughter, a hallway that spun slightly as he walked. Nothing solid enough to hold. He picked up the phone and called Anna, someone he hadn't spoken to in years outside brief nods at public events. When she picked up, her voice was cautious. "Mike." He hesitated before saying, "I need to ask you something about that gala night. Were you with Mary the whole time?" There was a pause before Anna replied. "I was with her for most of it. She left halfway through, said she needed some air. She came back looking different. Unsteady, her makeup was smudged." Mike closed his eyes, breathing in sharply. "Do you think something happened?" Anna's voice dropped to a whisper. "I think she trusted you. And you didn't even look her in the eye the next time she saw you." Mike clenched his jaw. "I didn't remember seeing her at all. Not after the first round of drinks." Anna exhaled slowly on the other end. "Then maybe you didn't forget her. Maybe someone helped you forget." That statement hit like a punch to the chest. "What are you saying?" he asked. "I'm saying," she answered carefully, "someone might have drugged you that night." Mike stood still as the wind howled louder, his mind starting to consider something he hadn't dared before. Not that he was careless, but that someone intended to make him forget. Samantha entered his office with her usual grace, placing a cup of ginger tea beside his untouched lunch. "You've barely left the building in 3 days," she said gently. Mike sat behind his desk, eyes fixed on his laptop screen, but clearly lost in thought. "Do you believe it's possible someone drugged me that night?" he asked abruptly. She blinked, then carefully set down the tea. "That's a serious assumption. What makes you think that?" He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "I've been having flashes, pieces, conversations I never remembered. I've spoken to people who saw me that night, said I looked out of it." Samantha's face remained unreadable. "Do you remember who you were with most?" He shook his head. "Only the first hour or so. After that, it's black. I don't even remember going to the hotel." She slowly sat in the chair across from him. "Mike, maybe it's your mind trying to protect you." He looked at her, confused. "Protect me from what?" Samantha shrugged lightly. "From guilt, from confusion. From making sense of something that hurt someone else." Mike stared at her for a long moment. "I didn't hurt her intentionally. That much I know, but I can't stop until I figure it out." Samantha gave him a soft smile. "Then be careful. Digging up the past comes with sharp edges. You're building something good now. Don't ruin it chasing ghosts." Her voice was soothing, but her words made him pause. He turned in his chair and glanced out the window. "They're not ghosts, Sam. They're my sons." Her smile tightened slightly. "Then maybe focus on being there now. You can't fix what you don't remember." Mike studied her, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. "Maybe not. But what I don't remember is costing me more than what I do." Samantha reached for her tablet, her voice lower now. "If you need anything, research, files, just say the word." Mike nodded, but said nothing more. Inside, a new question had formed. Why was she so quick to shift the focus away from the truth? The park was nearly empty that Saturday afternoon, save for a few families scattered across the grassy field. Mike arrived early with a small bag of snacks, a football, and a book about dinosaurs he'd picked up on impulse. He was already sitting on a bench when Mary arrived with the twins. Her expression was wary but calm. "I'll be nearby," she said quietly. "They've been asking about you all week." Dean ran up to him first, hugging his knees with unfiltered excitement. "Mr. Mike, can we play?" Mike smiled, placing the ball on the grass. "Only if you promise not to beat me too badly." Daniel followed, more reserved but curious. As they played, Mike laughed louder than he had in years, his tailored shirt sleeves rolled up, his polished shoes now dusty with grass. It was clumsy, chaotic joy, and it melted pieces of him that had long been frozen. After an hour, they sat beneath a tree sharing juice boxes and crackers. Dean looked up suddenly and asked, "Are you a dad?" The question pierced through the peace. Mike looked at Mary, who froze mid-step nearby, waiting. He turned back to the boys. "I'm still learning how to be one," he replied, voice gentle. "But yes, I am." Daniel furrowed his brow. "But where were you?" Mike hesitated, then crouched to their level. "That's a long story. One I hope to tell you when you're ready. But the truth is I missed a lot, and I'm sorry." Dean tilted his head. "Mommy cried a lot when we were babies. That hurt more than any accusation." Mary walked over then, crouching beside them. "He's here now," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "That matters too." Mike looked at her, humbled by the grace in her words. "I'll earn it," he promised softly. That day, as he watched the twins lean into him with sleepy heads and sticky hands, he realized he didn't just want to be their father. He needed to be. The rain started unexpectedly that evening as Mary stood at her kitchen sink, rinsing dishes while the boys dozed on the couch. Mike had dropped them off an hour ago, and for the first time in a long while, the house felt both full and fragile. She wiped her hands, grabbed her journal, the same one she used throughout her pregnancy, and sat at the dining table. Pages filled with moments he never knew. Cravings, sleepless nights, tiny kicks, and growing names, Dean and Daniel. She didn't notice the tears until they dropped on the page. The knock on her door startled her, and when she opened it to find Mike standing there soaked, holding an umbrella with that uncertain look in his eyes, she stepped aside silently. He noticed her red eyes but said nothing, placing the umbrella by the door. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "Me neither," she whispered, her voice raw. She sat on the couch, and he joined her slowly, the silence between them stretching until it cracked. "I carried it all alone," she began, not looking at him. "Every appointment, every fever, every birthday. I used to imagine you walking through the door, just once, to say you remembered. But you never did." Mike leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "If I had known, Mary—" "But you didn't," she cut in, voice rising. "And that's what hurts the most. You didn't even notice I was gone. You didn't chase me. I thought I was disposable to you." Her chest heaved, but she kept her composure. "I waited for a call, for an apology, for anything. But all I got was silence and two pairs of eyes that reminded me of you every day." Mike's throat tightened. "I wasn't silent out of cruelty. I was silent because I didn't know." She looked at him then, eyes fierce through the pain. "And now," he reached for her hand gently, "now I know. And I'll never stop making it right." She didn't pull away, but she didn't squeeze back either. She just let his hand rest there as tears finally fell freely. Mike sat upright in bed at 3:12 a.m., drenched in sweat, heart pounding like a drum against his ribs. A flash of perfume had jolted him awake, one he hadn't smelled in years. It was Mary's. Not the subtle scent she wore now, but the one she had that night, something floral and faintly spicy. He closed his eyes, breathing hard, trying to hold on to what followed. And then it came. An image of her standing in the hallway outside the ballroom, lit by the soft golden lights, looking up at him with teary eyes. He remembered saying something. He couldn't make out the words, but she had touched his face. Then another moment, a hotel hallway, her hand in his, laughter. He shot out of bed, grabbed a notepad, and began scribbling everything he could recall before it slipped away. The memories weren't complete, but they were real, sensory fragments of a night that had been locked inside him for too long. Later that morning, he found himself pacing outside Mary's house. She opened the door wearing a confused frown. "It's early," she murmured, pulling her cardigan tighter. Mike looked exhausted but driven. "I remembered something," he said. Her eyes widened. "What?" "Your perfume. The way you looked at me outside the ballroom. I remembered you touching my face. I remembered holding your hand." She stepped back slightly, blinking as if trying to hold back emotion. "That was the last moment before you shut down. You changed after that." Mike nodded. "And I remember something else. Someone calling my name from behind. A woman. Then it all goes black again." Mary swallowed hard. "A woman?" He nodded slowly. I couldn't see her face, but I felt wrong after that, like something pulled me away from you. Mary sat down on the porch step, so it wasn't me. Mike knelt beside her. No, something happened after you and I were together. Something I'm not supposed to remember. But it's coming back, one piece at a time. Her breath trembled as she whispered, "Then keep digging, because I want the whole truth. For me. For them," he nodded, "and I won't stop until I find it." Mike invited Anna to his office that afternoon, a move he rarely made unless it was business-related. But this was personal, and she was the only person he trusted to look past appearances. She arrived skeptical as ever, arms folded across her chest. "You look like hell," she said bluntly. "Feels worse than that," he admitted. He handed her a folder filled with copies of photos, email timestamps, gala event schedules, and the hotel record showing someone else checked in under his name. "I think I was drugged that night, and I think someone close made sure of it." Anna's sharp eyes scanned the contents. "These are detailed. You're serious." "Dead serious," Mike said. "There's a gap, and no one fills that gap without help." Anna looked up. "What about security footage?" Mike sighed. "Wiped after 30 days. Too late now, but someone saw me. Someone had access. And someone didn't want me to remember Mary." Anna took her time flipping through everything, her brow furrowed deeper with each page. "What are you asking me for, Mike?" she asked. "I need you to help me connect the dots. You were there that night. You saw people I didn't. You know who had access to me." Anna leaned back. "There were plenty of women around you that night, but only one who never left your side until just before you disappeared." Mike's stomach tightened. "Who?" She stared at him for a long moment. "Your secretary, Samantha." Mike blinked. "Samantha?" Anna nodded. She was watching everything. Polite, quiet, but always there. And when Mary came back after stepping out, she looked shaken. "I thought it was just emotions at the time, but now..." Mike leaned back, connecting pieces he'd ignored for too long. "She's been protecting me all this time," he said aloud, more to himself. Anna raised a brow. "Or making sure you never asked the wrong questions." The room grew quiet. Doubt had been whispering inside him for days. Now it began to speak louder. Mike began showing up every few days, not with loud declarations or dramatic gestures, but with consistency. Sometimes he brought books, sometimes snacks, and occasionally tiny science kits that he and the boys would explore on the porch. The twins had grown more attached than Mary expected. Dean would tug at Mike's sleeve to share jokes, while Daniel often waited until he thought no one was watching before climbing into Mike's lap. Mary stood by with quiet eyes, surprised at how natural it had become. There were no titles, no forced dad talk, just moments of presence. One afternoon, Daniel handed Mike a hand-drawn picture of a man with big eyes and two small boys. "It's us," he said shyly. Mike smiled, touched beyond words. "That's the best thing I've ever been given," he whispered. On a quiet Wednesday, Dean asked to sit on Mike's shoulders during a walk to the corner store. Mike chuckled and lifted him with ease. "You're stronger than Uncle Kenny," Dean declared. "And Tayer." Mike grinned. "Well, don't let Uncle Kenny hear that, or he'll challenge me to a rematch." Mary walked beside them, occasionally glancing over, her heart torn between awe and fear. After the twins went to bed, she stepped out with Mike onto the front steps. "They're starting to rely on you," she said softly. "I don't want them to get hurt again." Mike's face turned serious. "I'm not going anywhere, Mary." She looked away. "You once did, even if unintentionally." Mike placed his hand gently over hers. "Then I'll spend every day proving I won't again." She didn't pull away. She didn't lean in either. But the silence between them, this time, felt less like absence and more like rebuilding. Mary began noticing subtler changes in Mike, the kind that came from deep internal shifts. He no longer wore that impenetrable CEO mask when he was around the boys. His laugh was fuller, his gaze softer. When Dean scraped his knee on the pavement one morning, Mike knelt down faster than she did, checking for gravel and calming the child with reassuring whispers. "You're okay, soldier. Just a scratch," he said, pulling a cartoon bandage from his wallet. "You carry these?" she asked, half smiling. "I carry a lot more now," he replied without hesitation. It wasn't just words. He remembered what the twins liked, Daniel's obsession with stars, Dean's love for frogs. And when he started reading bedtime stories with all the voices, Mary caught herself smiling without even meaning to. One evening, as the boys watched a cartoon marathon on the floor, Mary prepared tea in the kitchen while Mike cleaned up their scattered coloring pages. "You look tired," she said as he entered. "Long day?" He shook his head. "No, just thinking." She poured him a cup, handed it over. "What about—" He took a sip, then met her gaze. "About how much I missed that I can't get back. And how I never want to miss another moment again." Her hand paused over the sugar jar. "You're different now," she said. "Less guarded." He chuckled softly. "Kids do that to a man." She studied him. "It's not just them. You let yourself feel now." Mike grew serious. "I think losing the memory of that night cost me more than I realized. I lost the beginning of something important. And now, every second feels like a second chance." Mary didn't reply, but in her silence was a truth she wasn't ready to say aloud yet. He was becoming the man she once believed he could be. The twins' 5th birthday approached, and Mike suggested a small celebration, just the family and a few neighbors. Mary agreed reluctantly, unsure what he had in mind. To her surprise, Samantha volunteered to help plan everything. She arrived early on the morning of the party with balloons, carefully wrapped gifts, and a box of homemade cupcakes shaped like stars and frogs, each twin's favorite. Mary watched her move with confidence and kindness, organizing decorations and even getting Dean to laugh as she helped him wear his paper crown. "You're good with them," Mary admitted cautiously. Samantha smiled, adjusting a balloon string. "They're good kids. They remind me of a simpler world." It sounded sincere, and for a fleeting moment, Mary felt a strange comfort in her presence. Later that afternoon, while the boys played outside, Mary and Samantha found themselves alone by the drink table. "I don't think I ever said thank you," Mary began. "For helping Mike and for caring." Samantha's eyes softened. "It's easy to care about people who deserve it. You and the boys, you've been through so much." Mary tilted her head. "And what about him?" Samantha's tone was calm. "Mike? He's complicated, but he's trying. And I've always believed in his better side." They stood in silence, watching Mike chase the twins across the yard. "He's lucky to have someone like you around," Mary said. Samantha smiled, but this one lingered a little longer than usual. "Maybe someday he'll see it that way too," she replied lightly. It sounded harmless. Mary nodded politely, unaware that beneath Samantha's warmth was a secret well hidden. One even Samantha herself had buried so deep, it no longer felt like a lie. Mike sat in a quiet booth at a downtown cafe, the hum of espresso machines blending into the low murmur of conversation. Across from him sat Louis, a former hotel employee who now ran a small courier service. They hadn't spoken in years. "You sure you want to go digging into this?" Louis asked, sipping his lukewarm coffee. "I need to know if anyone escorted me to my suite that night," Mike said, sliding a photo across the table taken from that evening's press archives. "I don't remember any of it." Louis studied the image, his brows slowly rising. "Yeah, I remember that night. You were completely out of it. Everyone assumed you had one too many, but the way you moved, it wasn't like someone drunk. It was like someone drugged." Mike's jaw tightened. "Do you remember who was with me?" Louis leaned back. "There was a woman. I didn't see her face clearly. She wore a shawl and kept her head down. But she had your key card. She told me you needed help to your suite. I assumed it was your date." Mike's breath caught. "You're sure someone else used my key card?" Louis nodded slowly. "Yeah, she said she was authorized. She sounded professional, like someone who knew you well. Honestly, I thought she worked for you." The pieces were colliding in Mike's head like shards of broken glass. "Do you remember anything else?" Louis paused, thinking. "She handed me a red envelope to give to reception the next morning. I assumed it was some instruction, but I never asked questions." Mike's eyes narrowed. "What happened to it?" "Don't know. Probably logged and tossed once the suite was cleared," Louis replied. "But that whole night, something didn't sit right." Mike stood, slipping a crisp bill onto the table. "Thanks, Louis. You just confirmed what I've been trying not to believe." As he stepped out into the cold air, Mike wasn't angry, he was determined. Whatever was stolen from him that night, it wasn't just memory. It was the start of a life he was supposed to have. And someone had taken it intentionally. Mike returned to Mary's house just before sunset, the sky painted in pale orange hues. She was in the backyard, stringing laundry when he approached with hesitant footsteps. "Can we talk?" he asked. She turned, surprised at his sudden presence. "Something happened?" she asked, drying her hands with a cloth. "Yes," he said, voice quieter now. "I spoke to someone from the hotel, someone who saw me the night of the gala. He remembered I wasn't alone when I checked in. A woman was with me." Mary's posture stiffened. "Was it me?" Mike shook his head. "No, that's the thing. It wasn't. She used my card, got me into the suite, said she worked for me." Mary stared at him, stunned. "You think someone planned it?" Mike exhaled. "I don't think. I know now. I didn't walk away from you. I was walked away from you. Or rather, I was led away." They sat together on the porch steps, the boys giggling in the distance as they watered plants. "I can't explain what it feels like," Mike said after a moment, "to realize I lost something so real, not by choice, but because someone took it." Mary looked down at her hands. "So all this time, I blamed you for forgetting, but you were made to forget." He nodded. "And I need your help now. I need to figure out who had access to me, who could have slipped in and erased it all." She was quiet for a long time before whispering. "I thought it was punishment. That I was too hopeful, too naive. I never imagined." Her voice trailed off. Mike placed a hand gently over hers. "If you can find anything from that time, old letters, receipts, strange calls, I need every detail." Mary nodded. "I'll check. I kept more than I should have." They sat there a while longer, not speaking, as the boys ran toward them with muddy shoes and glowing smiles. For the first time in years, Mike felt the gap between them narrowing, painfully, slowly, but truthfully. The next morning, Mike contacted a cybersecurity expert he trusted, Victor Ease. Victor was a quiet genius with a habit of talking to computers more than people, but he owed Mike a favor from years ago. In Mike's office, Victor sat at his laptop, typing furiously. "I'm looking for hotel keycard data, digital timestamps, and login attempts from your corporate email that night," he said. "Anything unusual?" Mike paced nearby. "Someone used my access without my knowledge. I want to know who and why the logs were wiped." Victor nodded. "If the data was manually scrubbed, I might find traces. If it was done remotely, well, let's just say not everyone covers their tracks." Hours passed in tense silence. Samantha popped in twice with updates on meetings Mike ignored entirely. She didn't ask what Victor was doing, only offered her signature smile and said, "Let me know if you need anything." Victor watched her leave each time, then said, "That one. She's been with you a long time, right?" Mike nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. "She's been my right hand for years. She's always 10 steps ahead." Victor raised a brow. "Might be worth checking whose steps she's ahead of." He turned the screen toward Mike. "Here, see this. An email access timestamp using your credentials, but it happened from a secondary location, not your device." Mike leaned in. "What's the IP?" Victor traced it. "A device registered under a work-issued tablet belonging to your assistant, Samantha Gray." Mike's heart slowed. "She was the last person with me that night before I blacked out." Victor clicked again. "And here's a log of her checking you into the hotel system. Not under her name, but the digital signature matches her device." Mike didn't speak. His breath caught in his throat as the truth began to surface, not fully formed, but dangerous and close. Samantha's words echoed in his mind. "Don't destroy what you're building by chasing ghosts." But it wasn't a ghost anymore. It was something far more alive and deliberate. Mike returned to the office the next day wearing an expression that made even the junior staff keep their distance. He was quieter, more introspective, but still professional. Samantha, unaware of what Victor had uncovered, brought him his coffee and stood beside his desk. "You've barely looked at your calendar today," she said, her voice light. "There's a board call at 3. You want me to push it?" Mike gave a slow nod, eyes scanning an old photo on his desk, the gala night picture where he'd once stood obliviously between people who had all smiled for the camera. "Samantha," he said without looking at her, "can I ask you something personal?" She tilted her head. "Of course." He turned to her finally. "If someone thought they were protecting you by doing something behind your back, something you didn't ask for, but it changed the course of your life, would you forgive them?" Samantha paused, then offered a warm, practiced smile. I suppose it would depend on what they did, and why. She placed the coffee on the desk, carefully. Sometimes we take actions in the moment because we believe it's for the best. Regret often doesn't come until much later. Mike's eyes narrowed just slightly. Even if the action altered someone's fate without their consent? She laughed softly, though her gaze didn't hold the same ease. You're thinking too hard again. Maybe it's time to stop digging through what happened and start focusing on what's in front of you. Mike leaned back in his chair, studying her. What do you think is in front of me? Samantha moved closer, voice dropping. A chance to rebuild. You have a woman who still lets you in, even after all the pain. You have 2 sons who adore you. Isn't that enough? Mike didn't answer. Not because he agreed, but because her response confirmed something deeper. Samantha didn't want the past uncovered. And now, more than ever, he was sure he had to. The following weekend, Mike arrived at Mary's place with the boys' favorite pizza and a new telescope he'd ordered for Daniel. The boys ran straight into his arms, thrilled, and Mary smiled faintly as she ushered them into the backyard to play. After dinner, when the twins were tucked in, Mike and Mary sat under the porch light, wrapped in the comfortable silence of 2 people learning each other again. They're getting used to you, she said softly. Even Daniel doesn't pretend to be shy anymore. Mike nodded, watching the stars. I never thought I'd fall so hard for 2 little people in such a short time. Mary looked at him, her voice gentle. You didn't just fall for them. You've changed. You're warmer, more open. He looked at her then, his eyes lingering. That's because of you. Because you let me come back. Without thinking, Mike reached out and gently brushed her hair behind her ear. The gesture was soft, intimate. Mary didn't pull away, but something shifted in her posture. Mike leaned closer, his hand hesitating at her cheek. Then he kissed her. It was brief, unsure, but filled with unspoken history. When he pulled back, Mary remained still, her eyes holding too much silence. Mike, she said softly, don't mistake healing for a reset. He swallowed, sensing the weight behind her words. I thought maybe... I know, she interrupted gently, and part of me wanted to lean into it. But we can't skip over the years. I raised 2 boys in your absence. I lived through birthdays you weren't at. I forgave a man who didn't even know he needed to be forgiven. Her voice didn't shake, it was calm, honest. If we're going to try again, we need to build it from here. Not from a kiss that doesn't fit just yet. Mike nodded, quietly devastated but deeply respectful. Then we'll take it slow, he said. I'm not going anywhere. She gave a small, appreciative smile. Good, because this time I need you to mean it. Mike sat across from Anna at her kitchen table, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold in his hand. She had spread out her notes on a corkboard, names, arrows, photos, timestamps, and highlighted dates all connected with string. It looked like an investigation board from a detective movie, but every piece of it was real. You've always had that obsessive streak, Mike muttered with a ghost of a smile. And you finally gave me something worth obsessing over, Anna shot back, tapping a spot on the board. Now look here. The key card used to check you in was flagged 3 days later in your office records, but you never reported it lost. That means someone had access before the party, someone you trusted enough to leave it lying around. Mike's chest grew tight. Samantha, Anna nodded grimly. And here's what's worse. She submitted your morning travel report the next day, which means she saw you. She knew you wouldn't remember. Mike leaned forward, his voice barely audible. She was always there. Every meeting, every trip, every late night at the office. I never questioned it. Anna stared at him. Exactly. Because she was always just helpful enough not to raise suspicion. But Mike, she's the common link. He sat back, stunned by the implications. She didn't just watch me forget. She made sure I never remembered. Anna gathered the papers. You need to confront her. Carefully. If she went this far to keep the truth hidden, you need to be smart about what comes next. Mike stood, his jaw set with new purpose. She took 5 years from me, from Mary, from my sons. And she did it pretending to protect me. He paused at the door. I'm going to find out how far she went, and why she thought I'd never figure it out. Anna nodded. Be careful, Mike. She's already shown what she's capable of. And with that, he stepped into the cold evening air, determined to confront the ghost who had never left his side. Rain pattered lightly against the windows of Mike's apartment as he pulled out the travel garment bag he hadn't touched in years. It was the suit he wore the night of the gala, the one he hadn't remembered packing, let alone wearing again. As he ran his fingers along the seams, he noticed something stiff sewn into the inner lining of the blazer. Curious, he reached inside and retrieved a slim black hotel keycard with a barely visible date stamp. The night everything went blank. He stared at it like it was a relic, his heart thudding. This key had never been returned, never used again. But someone had made sure it was on him after the fact, tucked away like a placeholder in a puzzle he wasn't supposed to solve. He dropped into his desk chair and pulled up the hotel's layout, locating the suite number. Then he checked his own calendar records. His schedule had been scrubbed clean for that evening. He called the hotel manager and requested archived logs for any trace of that room being used under his name. "We've had privacy updates," the manager explained, "but I'll forward what we still retain." A few minutes later, Mike received a file with an unsigned receipt and a breakfast tray order marked with preferences he didn't remember ever having. Scrambled eggs with basil, dark roast coffee, no sugar. None of it was familiar. But the key detail was the signature at checkout. It wasn't his. Not even close. Mike zoomed in, scanned it against several company personnel files, and his stomach tightened. The loop on the S and the downward curl on the G. They were identical to Samantha's stylized initials on internal memos. He stared at the screen for a long time, 100 thoughts racing. She had been in the suite. She had signed him out. And she had done it all without ever looking suspicious. Mike leaned back in his chair, the key card between his fingers. Whatever she'd done, however far it reached, he was done pretending he didn't see it. The following day, Mike visited his late mother's home, now empty, echoing with the distant scent of lavender and memory. He hadn't returned since the funeral. As he moved through the rooms, he entered her bedroom and opened the drawer of the cedar nightstand. Among framed photographs and a half-used bottle of perfume was a cloth-bound journal. He hadn't known she kept one. He opened it slowly, the pages revealing reflections in careful, slanted handwriting, her thoughts, prayers, worries about him. But near the back, written weeks after the gala, he found a single entry that made his hands go cold. Mary came to visit. She was pale, trembling. She didn't want anything, just confirmation that she wasn't crazy. She said Mike had looked through her like she wasn't real. Something happened between them. I don't know what, but my son wasn't himself. His eyes skimmed the rest. I saw a flicker of fear in her, but deeper still, grief. He closed the journal and placed it gently on the dresser, every part of him aching. His mother hadn't told him, hadn't even hinted she'd seen Mary during that time. Had she wanted to shield him? Or did she believe the illusion too, that he had simply abandoned the woman he once loved? Either way, her entry proved one thing. Mary hadn't misremembered. She had sought help, and his mother had seen it all firsthand. He looked around the room, absorbing the silence. A woman who had always protected him had sat on this bed, listened to the woman carrying his children, and still never intervened. Maybe she too had doubted Mary's truth. Or maybe Samantha had told her something, spun a story that made Mary's anguish sound irrational. Mike stood and wiped a hand down his face. The past was no longer hidden in shadows. It was layered in the quiet decisions people made in his absence. And one of those decisions had shaped the last 5 years of his life. Now it was his turn to make one of his own. The nightmares were different now. No longer shapeless darkness, they carried specific images, hallways, perfume, whispered names. Mike awoke in a sweat one night, the echo of his own voice crying out in his ears. But this time, something shifted. He closed his eyes and let the image settle. Mary standing in the middle of a hotel suite, her face confused, her dress slightly wrinkled. She was speaking, but her voice was muffled. Then a figure moved behind him, a woman's silhouette. Mike turned in the dream, and though the face remained out of frame, the shape of her bun, the posture, the faint scent of vanilla-laced lotion. It was Samantha. He jolted upright in bed, heart racing, mind snapping into focus. He remembered now, not in full, but enough. Enough to confirm that he wasn't alone in that suite. And the last thing he'd seen before blacking out wasn't Mary's face. It was Samantha's back as she walked out the door. That morning, he met Mary at the park, where the twins were learning to ride their new bikes. After helping Dean untangle his chain, he asked Mary to walk with him along the trail. "I had a flash," he said. "A memory. I saw you in the suite. I was groggy, but I remember holding your hand. You were crying." Mary froze mid-step. "You do?" He nodded. "And I remember someone else. Someone behind me. I think they pulled me away before you even left." Mary's voice shook. "Do you know who it was?" Mike inhaled deeply. "Not yet. But I'm closer than ever." She looked down at the gravel path, then back at him. "I'm scared of what we'll find," she whispered. Mike looked at her, voice steady. "So am I, but I'd rather face the truth than keep living a lie." She reached out and took his hand, firm, trusting. "Then let's find it together." And for the first time since that night was stolen from both of them, they walked forward, not as strangers, but as survivors seeking the same light. Anna's fingers danced across her keyboard in the early morning quiet of her apartment. The evidence was nearly complete, but she needed one more confirmation, something personal, something Samantha couldn't scrub or fake. Then she remembered the florist. The day after the gala, Mary had received a bouquet of red roses with a handwritten note. Mike never sent flowers, ever. Curious, Anna called the small boutique where Mary had mentioned getting them. The owner, an elderly woman named Elsie, was remarkably sharp for her age. "Yes, I remember that order," Elsie said. A young woman with auburn hair placed it early that morning. Said it was a thank you from her boss to a woman he admired. Anna pressed, "Did she give a name?" Elsie paused. "She didn't, but she paid with a company card, had the logo of Donovan Holdings. I remember because I asked if she worked there, and she said, 'I manage everything he doesn't see.'" Anna's blood ran cold. That was a phrase she'd heard before, from Samantha. Back at her desk, Anna cross-referenced the florist's transaction ID with the Donovan expense reports. Buried in the archives was a flagged reimbursement labeled Discretionary Team Gesture, approved by Samantha Gray. The handwriting on the florist's note, a perfect match to Samantha's personal birthday cards she'd sent out annually to the executive team. Anna pulled everything together and made a final call. "Mike," she said, "I found it. The flowers Mary got the day after you were drugged, Samantha sent them. She wanted Mary to believe you remembered, but chose silence." On the other end, Mike didn't speak for a long moment. Then, she covered both ends. She made Mary believe I was cold and made me believe nothing ever happened. His voice was razor-sharp now. "She didn't just take a night. She took 5 years of a life I never got to choose." Anna added, "And she's been smiling through it all." Mike stood by the window, phone still pressed to his ear, watching the city come alive beneath him. "It ends today," he said quietly. "No more lies." Mike asked Samantha to meet him in the boardroom, claiming he needed help finalizing an urgent investor package. She arrived promptly, her usual calm demeanor intact, carrying her tablet and a notepad. "What's the fire this time?" she asked with a light chuckle. But the moment she stepped inside and saw Anna seated at the table beside Mike, her smile faltered. "Did I miss something?" Samantha asked. Mike didn't waste time. He slid a folder across the table, printed receipts, copies of keycard data, hotel surveillance metadata, and the florist's signature order. "You signed for me at the hotel," he said. "You erased calendar logs. You sent Mary flowers under my name to mislead her. And you drugged me that night." Samantha's face remained unreadable, but her silence was telling. "You've been at my side all these years, pretending to help me fix what you broke." Her voice was almost tender when she finally spoke. "I didn't plan for it to go that far," she said. "But that night, I knew she would be there. I saw the way you looked at her, and I knew if you two got close again, I'd lose everything." Mike's voice was low, bitter. "You took my memory and used it like currency." Samantha stepped closer. "I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because I loved you. I thought I'd be the one beside you in the end." Mike's eyes were ice. "You loved a version of me you had to lie to keep. That's not love, it's control." Anna stood, calling security before Samantha could speak again. "I'm not pressing charges yet," Mike said. "But I never want to see you near me, my family, or my company again." As she was escorted out, Samantha looked back, her eyes damp. "You'll remember me someday," she whispered. Mike didn't reply. That evening, Mike returned to Mary's house. The boys ran to him as always, their laughter a balm. In the living room, Mary waited, cautious. "It's done," Mike said. "She's out of our lives." Mary stepped forward slowly, her voice shaking. "You remember now?" Mike nodded. "Enough to know I was never the man who walked away from you. I was the man who had his life stolen." She reached out, and this time, their hands met not in uncertainty, but in forgiveness. "So what happens now?" she asked softly. He looked down at her, voice steady. "Now, we begin again. Here's the Bible verse for the story, Luke 12, verse 2. The time is coming when everything that is covered up will be revealed, and all that is secret will be made known to all." Application to the story. Just as Mike's stolen night and Samantha's deception were eventually uncovered, this verse reminds us that truth cannot remain buried forever. No matter how carefully orchestrated a lie may be, time and light will reveal it. Justice and healing walk hand in hand with truth. Moral of the story: the silence of deception can steal years, but the courage to seek the truth can restore a lifetime. Explanation: the story teaches that healing begins when truth is pursued, no matter how painful or complicated. It warns against manipulation disguised as loyalty, and it champions emotional honesty, second chances, and the strength it takes to rebuild what was nearly lost. The journey back to love, family, and identity may be long, but every step in truth brings freedom.